Welcome again to Joe Stunner Boxing. Oleksandr Gvozdyk stops Ricards Bolotniks in 6 rounds, and this was a curious fight because Gvozdyk retired after being stopped by Artur Beterbiev. That was back in October 2019. He then had 2.5 years out, came back with a 6 rounder earlier this year. Won on points against a journeyman, and he was now back in looking at a 10 rounder with Ricards Bolotniks. Gvozdyk, we know a lot about him, illustrious amateur career. I think he had about 300 amateur fights from Ukraine, currently 36 years of age, so not getting any younger. And you've got to ask, why did he retire? Well, after the Beterbiev fight, he was kind of, in that Beterbiev fight, it was very interesting because he was doing well early on, like a lot of people do against Beterbiev. And then he kind of got ground down, and it was almost like mentally he just got eroded and eventually capitulated. And he also lost to Beterbiev in the amateurs. Well, I don't know whether I'm reading too much into this, but Beterbiev, as we know, is Russian, and Gvozdyk is Ukrainian. And we know what's happening over in Ukraine, don't we? So I wonder if Gvozdyk thought, I just can't retire having lost to a Russian. I've got to come back. But again, I might be wrong about that totally. But against Bolotniks, it was going to be, it was a good matchup, I think, for a 10-round fight, because Bolotniks, although he's limited, I wouldn't call him world class. I'd call him good European level. He can take your rounds, and he won't go out of there without a fight. Well, as it happens, he lasted into, like I say, the 6th round. And he's had a curious career, Bolotniks, because I don't know what he is. What is he, in his mid-30s, early 30s? He looks old, probably looks older than he is. Sort of bald, bullet-headed type of guy. But if you go through his record, I mean, he came in with 19 wins, only 6 stoppages or KOs. 6 defeats, and 4 of those were by stoppage and a draw. And if you go way back in his career, I mean, he lost his second fight by 3rd round TKO against a guy called Abel Mikhailin, who I didn't know much about. I looked at this on BoxRec before I did the video, and Mikhailin is still undefeated. He hasn't fought for 3 years, but he's 13-0 now, and then he lost in his 4th fight, Bolotniks, to Andreas Evangelou. Now, Evangelou hasn't fought for 9 years, but he's another one who is still undefeated. Well, he's retired. You assume he's retired if he hasn't fought for 9 years. But he retired with like a 10 wins and a draw and no defeats record. At one point, he was signed with Matchroom, I think, along with his brother. And then there was a draw, I think, in his 6th fight, Bolotniks. And then he started, picked up a few wins here and there. And he was matched very, very tough. And he's clearly learned on the job. You know what I mean? He lost a 6th rounder to a guy with a 5-6-1 record. And then he'd come back and he'd stop one guy who was 8-0 at the time. He stopped him in the 2nd round. I can't remember the guy's name. But then he'd lose, a split decision. And then he'd win by 1st round knockout, and then he lost in 6 rounds to Biso Machunu. I mean, he's been all over the world, Spain, and the guy's from Latvia, by the way, Bolotniks. So he's fought a lot of his fights in Latvia, predominantly in Riga. But he's also been to France and Britain, obviously. And I think his main coming out party was when he beat Hosea Burton for one of those worthless WBO European title or some crap. And that got him a fight with, he beat Hosea Burton. At the time, Burton only had 1 defeat, but he beat him on points. And I got an idea he had Burton on the floor as well. And then he had a good win against Serge Michel. Stopped him in the 10th round. I think that was a 10 round. He stopped him in the final round, and that was it in defence of the WBO European light heavy title, whatever that is. The EBU title is the only European title I'm interested in, but I suppose it got him a few paydays, didn't it? And then he fought Buatsi, and Buatsi stopped him in 11 rounds. Since then, that was in 2021. In 2022, Bolotniks came back and won an 8-round decision over a previously underrated guy called Sep. S-E-P I can't remember the guy's first name, but his surname was Sep. No, I can't remember his first name. Anyway, he was undefeated. He had 11 wins and no draws, no defeats. And again, I guess beating an undefeated guy gets you some notice. In he goes with Oleksandr Gvozdyk on the undercard of the Canelo Ryder fight. Now, for the first, with Gvozdyk, he's coming back. He's 36. He wants to prove himself again. He wants to get back into the world title mix, obviously. This 10-rounder was going to probably shed a lot of rust. You have 2.5 years out. You've got to get back into the rhythm of things. Gvozdyk looked very fit, very physically fit. In the early couple of rounds, he showed some good, slick skills. You expect him to be so well schooled, having had all those amateur fights. And he is a former WBC world champ as well. And the only defeat on his record is to Beterbiev. So in the first couple of rounds, he was looking the part. Lots of lovely straight punches, stand-up boxer, very quick, good hands. Didn't seem to have an awful lot of miles on the clock, to be honest with you. Probably hasn't, because he won his title off Adonis Stevenson by knockout. And Stevenson, was an established fighter. He suffered a bad injury after that fight, but recovered. But Gvozdyk hasn't got many miles on the clock, so he's probably a young 36, and probably the 2.5 years out gave his body a chance to recover, and for him also to get mentally prepared and decide, do I really want to fight anymore? And apparently he does, because he was looking quite good. And then Bolotniks started to put it on him a bit. It was only with single punches, but he got through with a couple of overhand rights they were only single punches, but they were landing. And there was another, I can't remember whether it was the 4th or 5th round, a good left hook behind the ear. It didn't trouble Gvozdyk, but it implied that Bolotniks was really getting closer, a lot closer. And you were thinking, this is warming up. This is, perhaps this, in the second half of this fight, Bolotniks can really make it awkward for Gvozdyk. And Gvozdyk's defence did look a little bit porous. But then in the 6th round, suddenly, out of nowhere, Gvozdyk lands a right hand to, I think it was a temple, totally discombobulates Bolotniks. Bolotniks staggers away. He appears to have a cut across his, I think it was his left eye. Gvozdyk chases after him, gets Bolotniks on the ropes, unloads, and Bolotniks takes a knee. And yeah, he does have a very bad cut, unzipped. His flesh was totally unzipped. Blood all over his face. He did get up, but the body language was very, very negative. I don't think he replied to the referee when the referee spoke to him, and the ref waved it off, and there was no complaint from Bolotniks. So right out of the blue, Gvozdyk gets himself a stoppage in 6 rounds, and it was, like I say, it was just out of the blue. So, I don't know, it was a good rust shedder. It was a good little runaround against a half-decent opponent. Can Gvozdyk come back and make a splash in the light heavyweight division again? I wonder if he's after that rematch against Beterbiev. Maybe Ukraine versus Russia is on his mind, Maybe he wants to make a statement. Maybe he's fighting for something greater than himself now. You just never know. Mind's a funny thing. Different things motivate different people, and I'm just wondering if that's motivated him. But did you see this fight? What did you think of Gvozdyk? Where do you think he's at in his career? Do you think, clearly he's going to have to move up a few levels before he gets back up to world level. But this wasn't a bad little matchup, wasn't a bad little 6 rounds. He had that 6-round run around against earlier in the year against the journeyman. Obviously won a unanimous decision there. So he's coming back. What do you think? Where do you think he's at? And who would you like to see him fight next? Leave your comments below if you've got any, and I'll reply to them, of course. And thank you for your time as always. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Hit the like button, and take care of yourselves. Bye for now.